I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Daniel P. Sheehan, a constitutional and public interest lawyer, public speaker, political activist, and educator. Over his career, Sheehan has participated in numerous legal cases of public interest, including the Pentagon Papers case, the Watergate Break-In case, the Silkwood case, the Greensboro massacre case, the Penca bombing case, and many others. He established the Christic Institute and the Romero Institute, two nonprofit public policy centers, and since 2015, he's lectured on American history, politics, and the assassination of John F. Kennedy at the University of California at Santa Cruz. Sheehan is currently the Chief Counsel of the Romero Institute, where his focus is on the Lakota People's Law Project. Sheehan has spoken publicly about UFOs and has also served as counsel for Harvard University psychiatrist John Mack, as well as Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project. He currently represents Luis Elizondo, the former director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, in a case against the U.S. Department of Defense. So, Danny, I hope it's okay if I call you that. Welcome.
Yeah. Terrific.
It's, as we were discussing before the interview, it is a true pleasure and an honor. Your background is just amazing, absolutely amazing. So I'm so honored to have you with me today.
Terrific. No, I appreciate it. Thanks, Tim.
Absolutely. Well, so before we get started, I do want to urge the audience to click the subscribe button, subscribe to this channel if you like the interviews, share this with friends. Also, hopefully follow me. Definitely follow Danny on Twitter if you haven't already. And I'm going to put links in the show notes to all of that. But, subscribing is a way to kind of get the latest news and updates. So I want to jump right into the headlines. The UAP Disclosure Act of 2023, co-sponsored by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York and Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota, has effectively been gutted. Can I ask for the latest news on this rapidly changing story?
Well, there's a lot of the news, of course. The bottom line is that ever since 1977. When I was the general counsel at the Jesuit National Headquarters in Washington, D.C., in their National Social Ministry Office, I've been working on this issue of the UFO phenomenon and extraterrestrial intelligence because I was contacted then by the Library of Congress, the Congressional Research Service, that was asked by President Carter to prepare two classified studies for him. One on the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence, and the second one was the issue of any potential relationship to one or more of the sightings of UFOs. And that was how I got drawn into this on a professional level. In that context, I briefed the SETI program, at Jet Propulsion Laboratories out in Pasadena, California, on the theological implications of contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. And I was also given access to the classified portions of Project Blue Book. It was there that I saw the photos of a crash retrieval operation that was being undertaken by the U.S. Air Force in that particular instance. And I brought this information to the Jesuit headquarters and shared it with them. Got authority from them to ask the 54 major religious denominations of the United States to assemble a task force to try to get out ahead of this issue from a theological point of view, and was later contacted, as you mentioned, by Dr. John Mack in 1994 when he had been contacted by the United States Air Force and other military services to provide psychological evaluations of officers who had insisted upon filing UFO reports. And one of the first responses of the military was always to have them get a psychiatric exam. And they would bring them to the Harvard Medical School, the kind of top of the line. And Dr. Mack, after having done a number of these psychological evaluations, became kind of intrigued by the fact that not only the fact that the military kept sending these people to him, but the fact is that he found virtually all of these people to be actually all of these people to be very well within the normal parameters of normal psychological health, and yet they kept insisting upon having had these encounters. And so he ended up preparing a paper, which he submitted to the New England Journal of Medicine to report on this kind of strange psychological phenomenon that was going on, and they refused to publish it. And so he ended up getting it published as a book. It was called Abductions, Human Contact with Aliens. That was the kind of classy name that was given to the book by the publishers. But the bottom line is he got dragged up in front of a faculty committee at Harvard University that were excoriating him for having published a book like that, thought that it undermined the credibility of Harvard University. And he contacted me and asked me to represent him in front of the committee, which I did for some 18 months. And they finally apologized to him. And then he set up a thing called the Project for Extraordinary Experience Research, which I became general counsel for. And I was directly involved with Dr. Mack from 1994 to 2004, when he was accidentally killed by a hit and run driver. No conspiracy there. It just was a total accident. But the bottom line is then I was contacted by Dr. Stephen Greer when he put together the Disclosure Project, when there were, like 60 major military people and government officials who had been interviewed about their direct information about the UFO phenomenon. And Stephen Greer put this information together, and we made a presentation in 2001 at the National Press Club to the staff, mainly, of the congressional representatives. And then as general counsel, I accompanied a number of the witnesses to go see their congresspersons and tried to get Congress to do something about this, to come forward with this. The kind of uniform message that we were getting from these congressional representatives is that, look, there's a lot of us here on the Hill who are concerned about this, but we know that if we try to do anything about this, we'll be targeted by this. There's a covert operation underway on the part of the Central Intelligence Agency and the U.S. Defense Department to try to destroy the careers of anybody who tries to raise this issue and to probe into this particular issue. And so we couldn't get much of a response from them. We continued to gather witnesses, and in 2013, we had a citizens hearing that Steve Bassett helped coordinate, and we brought forth 40 witnesses to make public testimony under oath in Washington, D.C., trying to put more pressure on. And we had former senators, United States senators and congresspeople chair a panel that would ask questions of these people, et cetera. So, and then it was for that reason that in 2017, in December of 2017, when Lou Elizondo, who, as you mentioned, was the head of the top secret program in the Pentagon investigating UFOs, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, he and Christopher Mellon, who was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence under both President Clinton and under George Bush Sr., or George Bush W. Bush. They came forward and presented the now quite famous videos that were taken of the Tic Tac and the gimbal, and these are the F-18 Super Hornet gun camera videos that were taken that ended up getting the New York Times to publish this, both on its internet site with the videos and on the front page of the New York Times, which sort of began the sort of modern era, the most modern era of the whole UFO phenomenon. And when the United States Pentagon mounted this campaign of lying about this, and at first denying the validity of the videos, denying the existence of any kind of investigative agency inside the Pentagon about this, denying that they ever knew anything about Lou Elizondo or that he ever was employed. Lou ended up retaining me, not just any lawyer in the country on this particular issue, but contacted me and retained me to represent him. And we filed this complaint with the Inspector General of the United States Defense Department, and then went to Washington and briefed the Inspector General and his staff about this issue, demanding that there be the promulgation of a set of criteria by means of which people inside the military and the intelligence community could actually report UFO sightings and contact with extraterrestrial life, etc., without being retaliated against, like Lou had been. And that triggered an entire set of processes inside the government, whereby the Defense Department did in fact announce that it was going to be undertaking a review of this entire area, which then attracted the attention of the people in the United States Senate Intelligence Committee. And then they started looking into all of this and began to get whistleblowers coming forward to the United States Senate Intelligence Committee. And then they drafted legislation to create an office, a joint office under the auspices of the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence, which was originally called the Office on Unidentified Aerial and Undersea Phenomena, Joint Program Office. And so that office was set up. It became nicknamed AARO because it was called the All Domain Anomalous Phenomenon Office. So the bottom line is that office ended up getting set up by Congress, but the problem was that it didn't have any subpoena power, and it didn't have any kind of investigative assignment. And so the office sort of sat there passively waiting for whistleblowers to come in. But the legislation, very importantly, provided safeguards for any of the people who came in and were willing to provide the information to this congressionally created office that was under the auspices of both the Defense Department and the Director of National Intelligence, so that they could come to that place and release the information to them, at least under security wraps. The problem is that the most of the whistleblowers didn't trust them at the AARO office, that they viewed that as being a function of the Defense Department and the intelligence agencies that had been responsible for hiding the information. And so that as the practice developed, the vast majority of the potential whistleblowers didn't trust that office. And so they continued to come to the Senate Intelligence Committee, delivering more and more information to them, since there were people with clearances there at the Intelligence Committee. And so that this backlog of information started building up in the Senate Intelligence Committee. And so they drafted a comprehensive 64-page proposed piece of legislation to set up an independent board to receive this information outside of the auspices of the intelligence community and the Defense Department, to basically gather this information, to extract the information from all 6 of the U.S. defense services, all 18 of the United States intelligence agencies, all 32 of the United States Defense Department agencies, and very importantly, all of the aerospace technology corporations, to whom pieces of the craft and technology from the craft that had been recovered over the years had been delivered to try to back engineer it. and so that this statute was shocking, basically, to the outside world. The United States Senate had basically put together a piece of legislation, passed it unanimously by all of the members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Republican and Democratic senators, and they put it forth publicly, saying that they had made a finding that there was credible evidence to believe, basically, that the United States government was in possession of alien spacecraft and biological evidence of a non-human species. And then, as we know, David Grush, who was in the Office of Naval Intelligence's UFO task force that was set up immediately after Luis Elizondo resigned, he came forward and testified to the House of Representatives, the National Security Subcommittee of the House Oversight Committee, and publicly testified that he knew from interviewing over some 40 witnesses that our United States government was in fact in possession of an extraterrestrial spacecraft, and that the biological remains of a species, an intelligent, highly technologically developed species that was non-human. And he publicly testified to that on July 26th of this year. And then on July 27th, the next day, the United States Senate came forward with this bill and proposed setting up this independent task force to have subpoena power to extract the information from all these agencies and to present it to this board. And then they could craft, very importantly, on the face of the legislation, a UFO controlled disclosure campaign plan, pursuant to which the entire government structures, including the executive branch, the legislative branch, with judicial review of the subpoenas that would be issued by this group, to present over a 7-year period a controlled disclosure to the world of all of the information that they had, which was voluminous and is voluminous with regard to this extraterrestrial civilization and the UFO phenomenon. And so that this came out of the Senate, was approved by 48 to 11 in the United States Senate, and went to the House. And then the Republican head of the Intelligence Committee in the House, Michael Turner, was reached out to by the private aerospace industry that is a significant funder of his campaigns, and who his home district is in the 10th district of Ohio, which is where the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is, where the craft was taken to that base from Roswell back in July of 1947. And he joined forces with the Republican head of the Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers, who is from the 2nd Congressional District in Alabama, which is the home base of the Redstone missile testing facility, and the home office, by the way, of Radiance Technology, which was involved in this top secret program that was known as the Prompt Global Strike program. And they were attempting to back engineer the technology from the UFO crafts that had been recovered to create a U.S. nuclear missile that could be launched from the United States and hit Russia or China within 2 minutes, using the anti-gravity and superluminal propulsion systems of the UFOs. And this was a terrible problem, and that they reached out to their 2 congressmen that they financed the elections of, and they began this campaign to shut down the effort of the United States Senate to appoint this independent board with subpoena power, and they had the power under the Senate legislation to exercise eminent domain on the part of the government to take back into its possession the technology that had been put into the hands of Lockheed Martin and Radiant Technologies, and a couple of these other, Raytheon and a couple others, who the government had secretly contracted with to back engineer this to make weapons. And so what's happened is this Donnybrook has been going on here between the Senate the overwhelming majority of the people in the Senate, and these two guys over in the Republican House, who are basically on the payroll, basically, of the aerospace industry, who have then enrolled the support of this new fellow, Michael Johnson, the new Speaker of the House. People don't even recognize his name yet, but that's who he is. That he's took the place of Kevin McCarthy. And the bottom line is that he then reached out and got Mitch McConnell from the Senate side to come over and join with him to try to keep this secret. And they worked together to undertake a process of extracting from the legislation that the Senate had passed already and sent over to the House all of the enforcement mechanisms, the subpoena power, the ability to exercise eminent domain and take back into the custody of the government this technology, these extraterrestrial spacecraft that they have, and so that what they've done is they've succeeded in removing the enforcement portions of the bill, and they've removed the independent board out of the legislation, and then they've come forward and passed a program which does in fact issue an order to all of the military services and all of the intelligence agencies, all of the Defense Department agencies, and to the aerospace corporations to turn over the information they have to the National Archives. But the statute authorizes each of those departments or agencies to exercise its own unilateral discretion to designate what information is to remain classified and cannot be made public and cannot even be provided to any of the members of Congress who don't have the adequate security clearances, right? And so that has been passed now. And it's been, the decision has been made by the conference committee between the House and Senate to put that language into the new National Defense Authorization Act that is going to be passed here right around December 21st or so. And so what we have is, some kind of process at least going on, pursuant to which all of those agencies have been ordered by Congress, or will be as of December 21st, ordered by Congress to turn the information over. But we know perfectly well from our past experience that they won't do it.
Yeah.
They will not obey Congress. Just like my own personal experience, we did the major federal criminal racketeering prosecution against the off-the-shelf enterprise of Oliver North and the CIA and all the people that were involved in that off-the-shelf enterprise, providing military equipment to the Contras in Central America, after Congress explicitly prohibited them from doing it, because there was no enforcement mechanism. In the Boland Amendment that was passed in 1984, prohibiting the Reagan-Bush executive CIA people from providing support to the Contras that were international criminals and drug smugglers, but they went ahead and did it anyhow. And so we prepared and filed the federal criminal racketeering lawsuit against them and dragged them into court, kicking and screaming, and finally forced the Congress to hold a set of public hearings on the Iran-Contra hearings and revealed what they were doing. But we have been hoping, our office has set up the New Paradigm Institute to work specifically on this UFO issue. And we were hoping we weren't going to have to file major federal legislation, or excuse me, federal litigation against them. We were hoping that the instrumentalities of the government itself were going to take responsibility for this and set up a responsible program for pulling this information out of those secret vaults and putting it in the archives and having a controlled disclosure of this information to our people. That has not happened yet. There is this order outstanding, or will be outstanding as of December 21st or so, ordering them to cough the information up. And for some process, that's a peculiar aspect of this bill that could pass, some process by means of which some of it will be disclosed, but that there's no oversight authority over it. I mean, there have been 6 different committees of Congress assigned responsibility for having oversight over this process, which means that nobody, no one specific group has been given the authority to do this. There are these 6 different committees that have lots of other things to do, that aren't going to be exercising any kind of coherent, centralized oversight over the decisions that are being made by the agencies themselves as to how much of this information is to remain secret. So it's on a grading. You know, I'm a university professor as well, and on a grading basis, you know, you'd give this like a 65.
Yeah.
Now it's passing, barely passing, you know, but you know, you're not gonna be writing letters of recommendation for the students that get a 65 in your course, you know, to go on to graduate school. So that's where we are right now.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for running through all of that. It is so convoluted, and I know people are trying to wrap their heads around this process. If it's okay, I want to run through a couple of sections from the newly released fiscal year 24 NDAA conference report. This is the report, I guess, that outlined the back and forth discussion between the House and the Senate where they actually gutted the bill. So in sections 1841 to 1843 on unidentified anomalous phenomena, it's written that, quote unquote, the conference agreement includes only the requirements to establish government-wide UAP records collection, to transfer records to the collection, to review the records for disclosure decisions under a set of authorized grounds for postponing disclosure. The agreement does not include the provisions that would establish an independent review board staff, eminent domain authority, or a controlled disclosure process. So that's exactly what you were saying a moment ago. So they cut out, I think, the big thing, the thing that people were the most upset about in the Twitter space, right, was eminent domain. But it sounds like that review board is also very important because you'd said that the Senate review board, the Senate Intelligence Committee, is currently being overwhelmed with a backlog of information they just can't get to. So they needed that to process through it, right?
Yeah. It was to have a whole 9-person board that was permanently assigned to do this with staff with a $20 million budget to extract this information and to process it and to make specific recommendations themselves as to what information should be made public, as distinct from allowing the agencies that have been hiding the information for decades to be allowed to make a unilateral decision about the fact that it wouldn't be disclosed. You know, so that was a central part of the entire legislation, was to have that independent board put together with subpoena power and with, as I mentioned, the power of eminent domain to order the retrieval of those spacecraft in the technology that's been handed over by the CIA and the other secret operations, these so-called undisclosed special access programs that have been working on this secret program under the black budget for these decades to make them give it back to the United States so that it could be developed for peaceful purposes and not just be used to make a secret weapon system, you know, on behalf of the Defense Department. You know, it's you know, when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets.
Yeah. Well, so
And that's what's happening here.
let me also go into section 1687. This was the other section of the conference report. It's a limitation on use of funds for certain unreported programs. And again, I know you're intimately familiar with this one. The report states the House recedes with an amendment that would remove the direction to provide information to the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and summarize the prohibition on spending for any unreported activities involving unidentified anomalous phenomena protected under any form of special access or restricted access limitations. But now, in this case, the conferees did ultimately agree that a prohibition on spending could cover these aspects of the programs. So does that mean that there is room for positive movement forward? I was kind of not sure how to take that, I guess.
Yeah. No, there is, if in fact when the new permanent director is put in charge of the Aero office, because Sean Kirkpatrick is leaving now, in part mostly because nobody trusted him. And it wasn't so much Sean's fault, is that the structure of the institution of the Aero office was set up such that it was just a passive recipient of people who were willing to come forward and were going to insist upon coming forward anyhow, that they go to a place where they could do this and have legislated protection from being retaliated against. But if in fact they were to assert their potential authority and really become an investigatory body and really attempt to gather this information and provide it to Congress, then this is part of the bill that is of some advantage. As I say, this is a 65 out of 100. It's just passing. And so there's potential here if the citizens remain vigilant through the New Paradigm Institute. That's why we've set it up. We set up the New Paradigm Institute, which is right there on Capitol Hill. It's the only civilian group, basically, that is authorized to be functioning inside the federal enclave there. I mean, we're immediately next door to the Senate office building where the Intelligence Committee is. And our job is to mobilize the citizenry to continue to put pressure on the Aero office, on Congress, to come forward to improve this regime that they have right now. So there's a skeletal framework now that is in place, which we can attempt to put some flesh on the bones, if you will, of this skeletal structure that they have in place. But the key is there needs to be muscles. There's no muscles in this skeleton right now that can give it life, that can give it movement, so that it can reach out and seize the information and draw it into the Senate Intelligence Committee. So that's the challenge that we have right now. There are really for the United States Congress to be passing a law that basically acknowledges that there is this information in the hands of the government, and that it pertains to flying saucers, to UFOs, and it applies to non-human intelligence, in and of itself is quite an achievement. This is an extraordinarily important moment in the history of the UFO phenomenon in its relationship to our government and our citizens.
And if I could jump in, I mean, one of the things that I've been seeing all week, I have friends and colleagues in the space that have been reaching out to me, and they've all expressed how disappointed they have felt at this decision. But in terms of silver linings, I mean, despite losing key provisions for UAP transparency, the passage of this act itself, to me, seems like a giant victory. And I mean, given the gravity of proceedings in the House and Senate, I would tend to interpret the very existence of this act as a veiled admission that defense contractors possess UAP materials.
That's right. No, what we have to do is view this as a first step. It's a first step in getting, in a sense, diplomatic recognition from the United States Congress, both houses of Congress, that this information exists. And when you acknowledge that information exists inside the government of an extraterrestrial spacecraft being in our custody, and it containing biological evidence of a non-human, intelligent, and highly technologically developed species, those are two extraordinary, important official concessions now that are being made. In a sense, it's a follow-up to the testimony of David Grush that he made in July 26th of this year, where he came forward as a very high-level government official and testified in front of Congress, in front of the House, telling them that this was true. And now what we have, in a certain sense, is a ratification of his assertions with regard to that, made by both houses of Congress. Even though we haven't succeeded in getting the ability to extract more information from them about it. But that's quite a concession that we've extracted. And let's be clear, this has been done because of the mass mobilization of citizens. That our New Paradigm Institute has a website, newparadigminstitute.org, where people were able to come to find out what the name of their congresspeople are. I mean, a substantial portion of people in the country don't even know who their congressperson is, much less how to get in touch with them. You don't just pick up the phone and call the Capitol. I mean, there's email communications that we put up on our website so that people could know who their congresspeople are. They're aware usually of who at least one of their senators is, at least the one that's in their party. And so the bottom line is that the New Paradigm Institute has been functioning as a central coordinating head for the people who want to come forward and have an actual impact on the decisions that are being made by Congress. So that it's the pressure of the citizenry that has brought about this step on the part of Congress, frankly, because there were elements inside the military industrial complex, military industrial intelligence complex, that were afraid if they didn't have some kind of visible process allegedly underway to cull this information and make some of it available to the public, that they were being threatened with what they use the term catastrophic disclosure. That's what they kept talking about. If you had to have one particular phrase that was being discussed all the time on the Hill, was the threat of catastrophic disclosure. And we kept on saying, what do you mean by that? What is it that's potentially catastrophic about the disclosure? And the reason that I was central to a lot of these discussions is the fact that I represented the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case, and the Nixon administration and the John Mitchell Justice Department in that case were insisting that if any of the information in the 47 volumes of the Pentagon Papers were publicly revealed, that it would be catastrophic, that basically it would impose irreparable damage to the national security of the United States. And we kept saying to them in chambers with the judge when they were trying to get an injunction against our New York Times to publish it, when they kept making those assertions, I would say, like what? Like, what are you talking about here? We're sitting here with the judge. Tell the judge what it is that you think is going to be catastrophic, because the New York Times is perfectly willing to exercise responsible judgment about what it's going to publish, the banner is all the news that's fit to print. And if it's not fit to print, the secrets of nuclear weapons technology, for example, on the front page of the New York Times, there may well be other things. So like, what are you talking about? Well, they wouldn't tell us. And so we went forward as the New York Times and said, we're going to publish all of it. The reality is they didn't publish all of it. I mean, there are things that we didn't publish, which later came out in the Frank Church committee, about the massive political assassination program, the Phoenix program, the massive drug smuggling that they were doing with Bang Pow. That was the CIA. The CIA station chief, Theodore Shackley, was engaged in that drug smuggling operation, and secretly funding the political assassination program with those monies. Now that didn't come out in the Pentagon Papers, but it did come out later. 4 or 5 years later, in Frank Church's subcommittee or special select committee. But what happened, of course, is the Central Intelligence Agency then retaliated against Senator Frank Church and put millions of dollars into his Senate race and ousted him from the Senate in the next election. They did the same thing to Dick Clark in Iowa, Senator Clark, who had opposed their covert operations in Africa, pursuant to which the CIA assassinated Patrice Lumumba. And to allow the Central Intelligence Agency and the covert deep state operatives of the intelligence community in the Defense Department to be having unilateral authority to decide what they're going to reveal about this stuff is not an appropriate resolution of this problem.
Well, and it seems to me like the legislative process is disclosure itself. I mean, what we've seen is over the last few years, reading through the legislation, you see the government saying UFOs are real and UFOs appear to be more than, swamp gas, right? And then the next year, we're going to have reporting on these because it's an airline safety issue. And now we're seeing crash retrieval. And one of the things that I was going to ask you about, and maybe this would be the catastrophic aspect of this, is this possibility of abductions. 5 years ago, I would have told you that that was all, bad psychology, I guess. But 5 years ago was a different world. And
Yeah.
so I think that's one aspect of this that hasn't emerged yet. Do you think that abductions will end up in the legislative process, or is that too big to even touch yet?
Uh, they've made it clear to us that that for us to not ask for that to be made public yet. But the fact is that if in fact the independent board had been approved and put in place, then the discussion of what to do about all of that could be taking place outside of the secret control of the intelligence agencies that have been keeping that secret for decades, and so there needs to be a more fulsome participation in that discussion than is going on inside the Defense Department, in the intelligence community, and so that's what we've been trying to achieve, and so that what they're faced with now is the continuing possibility that there would be catastrophic disclosure. That was exactly what the crafters of this bill from the Senate side were trying to prevent: catastrophic disclosure by undertaking a responsible, controlled process of disclosure.
Yeah.
And now, foolishly, the representatives of the private aerospace industry that are blinded by their short-term drive for personal profits, have stopped that process. And so that the warnings that catastrophic disclosure might well be in the offing here, if they didn't do that, is now on the table. So the question is, what might that constitute right now? And so that's the status of it right now. I mean, while the proponents of disclosure are feeling bad this morning, about the decision that's been made, you can bet there are people deep inside the intelligence community and stuff that are feeling even worse.
Yeah.
Because they have failed to achieve their objective in getting a responsible oversight process put in place. And so therefore, those of us in the citizen groups that are trying to get disclosure are going to continue apace, presenting people who have had direct contact experiences with the UFOs and with the phenomenon, and direct face-to-face encounters with extraterrestrial beings. And the fact is now that those witnesses are going to have much more credibility now, because of what we have been able to get Congress to do.
Well, it sounds like going forward, you're going to be filing some litigation then, and we can probably anticipate more whistleblowers as well, right?
Well, these questions have to be addressed now. We're in the process of trying to regather our constituencies and make sure that the American people don't lose heart here over the fact that that the enforcement power has been taken away from this act. But we view this as a first step. Okay,
Yeah.
that we've gotten we've basically got a 65% structure put in place, and it doesn't have enforcement ability. Some people are interpreting this as worse than nothing, because they're saying now it occupies the space. It's going to give people the false perception that something is really getting done, whereas it's not, because the agencies won't cough up the information. They're going to classify everything and keep it secret. And therefore, the American people are basically going to fold up their tent and go home. That's not happening. That I'm here to tell you that the New Paradigm Institute that has been set up to assist in this process is not going away. We're not closing our doors. That we're going to undertake a responsible, systematic process of bringing forward the information that is in the hands of the whistleblowers. We're going to be doing this, frankly, in cooperation with the Senate Intelligence Committee. It wants to have this done. And so that the choreographing of the bringing forth of this information is presently under discussion, of how we're going to do this. Because the reality is that the Senate Intelligence Committee is already in possession of a significant amount of this information. They were just trying to get an official public structure in place through which this information could be brought forward, rather than having to just have individual whistleblowers come forward and put them in front of the public in congressional hearings, and other ways. That we at the New York Times, we in a sense represented Dan Ellsberg and his desire to bring this information forward. What we did is we provided a pathway through which that information could be made available to the public. And I am, more than most people, intimately familiar with what those pathways are, by means of which we can bring this forward. And so we've got Russ Coulthard, over at News Nation now. There's a full staff of people now over at News Nation that are, I'm doing a big interview with them on Monday morning about this. That they've got a whole staff there that are going to be digging on this. They've got the Detail, the Hill, all kinds of major media people now, to say nothing about the New York Times, that has a vested interest in maintaining its continued credibility on this particular subject, or else they're going to lose all their readers to somebody that is willing to tell them about it.
Well, I was going to say Ross is a tremendous journalist. I can't say enough good things about him. An absolutely wonderful person, incredible integrity. So, if anyone can help move the ball forward, definitely he can. I've seen you guys together. That's something that I definitely won't miss. Well, Danny, if it's okay, I want to close for today. We have run through so many giant topics, and I would love to catch up with you in the future on this, but we've given people, I think, probably more than enough to digest for now. I'm going to put links into the New Paradigm Research Institute. I will put links into that.
It's newparadigminstitute.org.
Newparadigminstitute.org.
Okay. That's the one they come to. And that way they can get access to all the information. That's the platform where we're going to be providing the information, and it's going to be one of the outlets for the information that's going to be coming forward.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And again, I'm going to ask people to subscribe to my channel so that I can help keep them informed and help getting the word out about this. I want them to definitely follow yourself on Twitter. If they'd like to follow me, I am on Twitter as well. I'll put links into all of this stuff. But I want to thank you so much for your time. And let me close actually with a question. What can we expect coming up in the next few weeks for you? You'd mentioned you're doing an interview with Ross. You guys are going to start exploring what comes after this, basically the NDAA 2024 goes into effect. What can we look for next in the headlines for you?
We're going to be going to the churches and to the university communities to start coming forward, to set forth a set of disciplined studies in responses to this new reality that the Congress has basically, at least temporarily, missed the boat on. They may view it as catastrophic to have other institutions coming forward rather than the government, but this is what we warned them about. And it's our job to make good on what was threatened, basically, if they didn't do this. So we're going to be putting together full-scale academic courses that talk about what the economic implications of this are, what the theological implications of this are, what the philosophical implications of this are, what are the social psychological implications of having to come to grips with the fact that we are not, in fact, at the apex of all of the pyramid of all sentient life in the universe. You know, that we're going to have to come to grips with this. And if the government isn't going to participate in an honest and forthright way in this process, the citizenry is going to do so. And we're going to do so through mobilizing additional institutions that exist in our society. The religious communities, the academic community is going to come forward and begin to present this information to the world. That's what's going to happen.
Danny, thank you again so much for your time today, sir.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for having me.